Well, good morning, everybody. Our first map today looks at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And outside of the Pacific Northwest, much of the rest of the country has been relatively quiet. You just take a look here. A lot of this was about 7 days ago. Much of the Southeast has not had much rainfall for about 35 to 40 days, and the Southwest is still waiting on the arrival of its moisture this winter. So we just have some questions about the near-term pattern, and then we're going to get at the very end of this into the new long-range data that came out over the weekend from the European model, and also to even take a look at the Canadian model as well. So what I want to do next is I want to have a look at the water year-to-date precipitation. This is a percent of normal figure. And really what we see here is the really wet conditions. Now remember, a water year means we start on October 1st and we go to September 30th, okay? So we look here at Texas, and mainly the large system that was about, 10 to 12 days ago is what's delivered all of this rainfall. We looked on Friday at the 3-class improvement in the drought monitor here. That same system also delivered a lot of the moisture that you see through parts of the Missouri Valley, this whole region in through here, parts of the Mississippi and Ohio as well. It's the same one that put all that snow down in Montana. But you start to just really let your eyes go toward those really dry areas, like here in the southeast, really the lower Mississippi Valley into the southeast up to the mid-Atlantic, and then the whole of the southwestern United States. These are two areas that need to see some pretty significant change. Now, overall in this pattern, there is going to be a change that's going to help the southeast, and there will be some precip coming into California late. It's out there about day 8, 9, 10 in the forecast. But to really start to deliver the moisture into the southwest, given the pattern we have this year, we're going to have to get the subtropical jet to move toward that direction. Now, just thinking about the Southwest this morning, I decided to pull up a graph that shows you from 1895 to present for the Southwest United States, looking at October, November precipitation totals. And I put a trend line on the data from 1970. I just kind of arbitrarily picked 1970, thinking back here over the last several decades. And there has been a slight downward trend in total precipitation. It's to the tune of, we call this about 1/2 of an inch, maybe just a little bit more than that, but that's substantial in the Southwest. I looked at other parts of the country. There's no trends that are as pronounced as this for the Southwest, but I just think it's important to understand that there are these systematic shifts we have to just keep an eye on, and we have to wait until we get later in the season to get some of the big rainfall and snowfall events from California to Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Nevada, Utah as well. So remember, the big months for them are December, January, February, March, and sometimes even April, the end of their kind of wet season. Okay, next, I do want to remind you that right now California is in a position where it is drought-free. There's a couple areas that are abnormally dry, but it is drought-free. And we look at the reservoirs, and it's been a very long time, like several years, since I've been able to see the reservoirs at their, well, most of their values are above historic averages, which means we're going into a new water year without massive deficits. And a lot of this is to thank from last January and March. That's how important those 2 months are to what you see right here. Now, of course, we had big systems that rolled through in summer, right? We had the 2 deep lows that rolled through in late summer that also added to this. But overall, most of the water that you see here was from last winter's snowfall. So let's look at another way to kind of analyze this precipitation pattern. And we're going to look at the October 1st to November 5th precipitation ranks by climate district. And again, I'm just trying to get a handle on how dry parts of the Southeast are. Now, we know on the drought monitor that most of Louisiana and a big chunk of Mississippi is in exceptional drought. I mean, this has been truly just an epic amount of drought here, but this has been an area that's continued to get drier. Now, we do have changes. As I mentioned, we're going to see better flow from the subtropical jet come in here and start to improve the rainfall odds, but it's still several days away. This jet stream pattern lacks amplitude, and as a result, the systems that go across the country are fast, and we don't see a deep pull on this moisture until we get later in the time period. But overall, I do want to make note of something we've been keeping a close eye on, and that has been soil moisture values. So a month ago on October 5th, just notice how much of the the Midwest, the Ohio, parts of the Missouri and the Mississippi basin were so very dry, as were parts of the Southeast. That was a month ago. This is at 40 centimeters, so we're going down to 16 inches today, and this is now. So we've seen massive drought expansion here and here, but there's been improvement in parts of the Midwest, again, a month ago and now. And we've been talking about how we expected the Mississippi River to begin its recovery, and it's done that. We now have the levels currently, as of early this morning here, at about minus 5 feet. So they were about 2 weeks ago down to 12 feet below low stage, and they've been coming up. We're now at about 5 feet below low stage, and we still expect that number to continue to improve throughout the month of November and into December. All right, this is what we're keeping an eye on. It's going to be the global jet stream pattern as it comes off the Pacific, rolls across the country, and then moves out into the North Atlantic, where again, we've got 175-mile-an-hour winds at 6 miles above our heads coming into California today, and same speed going out here, into the North Atlantic. So what will be transitioning in this pattern is that this piece of the jet stream is kind of on its last legs. It's going to start to retract back over to Canada. We're going to get another kind of much stronger piece. I think it's going to come out of the subtropics and go right across Mexico. So if we look at one of my favorite diagrams, the MPJ phase diagram, the North Pacific Jet phase diagram, we can see how we're still equatorward shifted, but we're getting a retraction event being forecast. So all this means is we've been in this flow pattern that was like this. We're going to start to see the jet stream kind of retract back to something like this, okay? And what that's going to allow happen is more flow to come out of the subtropics toward the United States. And to see that all unfold, I want to give you that top-down view. We're going to have to stay in this top-down view for a while, given the way the pattern's currently set up right now for the whole of the Northern Hemisphere. So as we go through this Monday and into Tuesday, again, look at the extent of this jet stream here. The streak in the jet stream from Southern California all the way to the Great Lakes. Just remember, when you just follow along the jet streak, you just got to keep an eye on the exit region here. And that's where our lows are going to move across early this week. They're going to mainly stay on the northern side of it. The southern side of this is going to be dry, too much upper level convergence. We play this forward going into Thursday and Friday. We see this setup. I mean, honestly, if we could get this going on in our jet stream in late December, January, February, we would see this southward shift a little bit more. There'd be a bit more amplitude to it, and we would just be rolling systems up the East Coast. But as it stands, this one's not yet in that position. The system we're going to see is going to be offshore because of its kind of further east progression of that trough. But watch this. Okay, this is November the 10th into the 11th and 12th. Now, one thing important happens when this jet retracts. We don't split the flow up and ruin it for the west. And what I mean by that is I'm out here on Monday the 13th, and there's still troughing here as we watch the jet pull back. So we don't build the west into split flow where there's a ridge over British Columbia and a trough that's in California. Do you see that? So yeah, the jet is pulling back, but it's not as though it's falling to pieces as it comes into the west. So this just means we don't fully go over into extended long dry time period with a lot of mild air. What does happen though, after about the 14th, 15th, is look at that. Subtropical jet comes in. Look where the nose of it is. It starts to come into the south. It comes into the southeast. It goes too far to the south of the southwest, and that's why we keep this area overall drier. But that's going to be an important player once we get into late next week and beyond as to what happens in the midsection of the country in the south, the mid-south, and the southeast. But again, I don't see the destruction of a pattern here because we keep troughs in the Gulf of Alaska, and that's kind of a new kind of part of this pattern that's been evolving here as of late. So let's give you some real ideas on this. What I'm about to play is a 5-day sliding window of average precipitation anomalies. So we're still wet in the northwest. We have a storm track that rolls through here, and at the end of this 5-day time period, we get something out of Texas. So as we play it forward, we're going to watch the evolution of that. Look, the days, the 5 days that are from the 7th to the 12th, we get a bit of a break in the west. But you'll see here that the south starts to pick up chances for precipitation. And about 10 days from now, we're going to watch a system roll into the west that's going to start to deliver better chances for rain into California. Now, while that's all setting up, this area gets a little bit of a break. We're going to go probably 5-6 days without many systems rolling through a quieter time period. But watch this. As the subtropical jet begins to make itself felt after about, the 15th and 16th, you start to see this opening up here again, such that the 5 days that end on the 19th, okay, so the 14th to the 19th, we have better flow in the west, we've got better flow in the central United States, and overall, that's the influence of the lack of a split flow in the west and the subtropical jet. So what I'm trying to say is this isn't just full-bore, massive cyclones rolling across the country, high amplitude kind of pattern. No. It's more zonal. We're watching for these subtle features to come through rather than these big high amplitude ones. So where do we begin? Let's just start with our early morning all hazards weather map. We do have winter weather advisories out for the Sierra Nevada. There's some stronger winds in the west. We will see later today stronger winds in parts of the Midwest as well. Some dense fog early this morning in a few different pockets. But if we take a look at what's happened over the last 10 hours or so in terms of precipitation, we have a system curling up over the Great Lakes today. And you can see its main front stretching right down through. In fact, it just went over my house, brought in a little bit of rain here. You can see, watch this late in the time period, all of the, there's a big inversion, surface inversion down here in parts of the south. And watch this at the end, you'll see all of the wind turbines. That's all echo off of wind turbines here. And then you can see the system rolling into the west. And we're going to take a look at a deep low that's just off the coast here in a few seconds. So high-res models. Let's see how well they did in the overnight to pick it up right about now. So this is a pretty good setup. The model, I think, was well initialized. Snow in Ontario, a little bit of ice in the transition area, but rain moving throughout the Great Lakes today. And there's a front that's brought right in through here that's got some cooler air behind it and some rain. In the northwest, watch the deep low right here come on shore late this afternoon and this evening. So we've got snow in the Rockies, we've got some snow in the Sierra Nevada, and just widely scattered rain. I'll be flying out here later today, so I'll be going into some of this. Maybe I get a good view of it from the airplane. Going from there into Monday night and Tuesday morning. Okay, we do need to be on the lookout overnight hours as again, remember the jet's coming across. There could be some overrunning here, giving us the risk of maybe some freezing drizzle, light freezing rain. It's not forecast to be a lot, but it is in there. So watch this pretty carefully in parts of the northern plains and southern Canada. But going through Tuesday evening, playing out there until Wednesday. We'll go all the way to Wednesday midday. That's the setup. So you see these systems rolling pretty quickly across the northern tier of the U.S. And the last one's going to drop enough cooler air to the south that it's going to really knock the temperatures down, but maybe bring some snow into the central Rockies. Okay, I mentioned the wind. I just wanted to show you the wind gusts expected from the high-res NAM. So that system that's going through the Great Lakes, as we mentioned, behind it got some stronger winds. So there's pretty widespread wind field here of 30-mile-an-hour winds, maybe a quick gust up to 40, and then much stronger coming off the lakes here in lower Michigan. But that's not to say anything about what's coming across the west. I mean, we just see a lot of area here, picking up stronger winds. And of course, in the west, it's the mountain valley dynamics that really drive a lot of those stronger winds. Okay, let's go straight to our model comparison, GFS versus the ECMWF. And we've already watched through Tuesday and into Wednesday. Now, after we get out to Wednesday afternoon and evening, we're going to see high pressure settle in right along the spine of the Rockies. And that's going to give us a chance for some upslope flow right here in Colorado. And while that happens, a broader front will stretch right in through here behind the second system rolling through the Great Lakes. You can see the snow in Ontario and Quebec, but then that frontal boundary will set things up as the cold air finishes down south for better rainfall. You can see it's in both models. This is late this week. And that rain will try to push itself into the southeast. I think the European model's got the progression right, but Friday into Saturday, I want to watch the southeast for its first real chance of rainfall for some folks in weeks. So we'll keep an eye out on that. Now, meanwhile, we go back to the northwest where the flow is still coming in. This is now midday Saturday. You can see it targeting British Columbia. But as we work our way into the weekend, a deeper low begins to show up along the coast. And that one's going to help slide down here, delivering moisture into California. Now, you remember earlier I was saying, the jet stream is just really well set up to later this year deliver a big system up the East Coast, but I said it's a little too far east right now. That would have been that system. Now, if you put that closer to the East Coast, oh boy, that'd be a monster coming up here. But high pressure builds into the Midwest. See it right in through there? And then as we work our way out there to next Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to watch what could be, because it's been in every weekend model run I saw, a deeper low that comes into the west. And you can see both models have still bit into it. It's in the ensembles, so I want to watch that one carefully. Okay, a couple of numbers just to look at here. This would be just the European model's solution for total precip. I'm going to play you out. We'll get that second system Thursday, Friday coming in here, and there it moves into the southeast by Saturday. But overall, you look at the next, let's go all the way out to next Tuesday. We do have a lot of folks, like the southwest big section of the central plains, that really don't see much precipitation. Our active corridor rolls through here, and then it's out of Texas late this week into the weekend into the southeast, but the northwest continues to get targeted with the heaviest precip. On the snow side of this, let's just add it up from the European model. So again, we talked about that snowy corridor that rolls right in through here. This played out to next Sunday. We will watch late this week for the better chances as that cold air comes in for snow that's in coming down the spine of the Rockies here all the way down to New Mexico. Now watch the west here though. Early next week, there it is. Monday, watch Tuesday, Wednesday, getting into Thursday. That's when we're expecting to get this deep coastal low to roll down the west coast, potentially adding some first real big snow to parts of the Sierra Nevada. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. Next, let's go see where the pattern ends up after this, because one of the things a lot of us were discussing over the weekend was the model trend toward giving us more troughs in Alaska, in the Gulf of Alaska. And I just played you all the way out there to the 15th. We just continue to see these features with ridging east. Now, you should know that we've been talking about seeing something like this for a while, right? That's that MJO Phase 8, Phase 1 look that I want to still connect the atmosphere to. I still think it's mostly a tropically driven jet stream pattern. But out there to the 16th and 17th, I mean, these deep troughs that you see in the Gulf of Alaska or over Alaska up to the Chukchi Sea are really what I think is setting up the rest of North America. And we do see out there around the 18th being supported by the subtropical jet, and that's the system that's going to roll through the southeast and through the Midwest, through the east. That's really going to bring up some of those precip totals. All right, so what are we seeing in terms of probabilities? Well, as we mentioned, the drier side of this is a lot of the plains, okay, and the southwest. And the drier conditions we see down here in the southeast are fleeting, right? So we expect out there past the 15th for the moisture to improve, and you can really start to see that. But on the wet side of this is the best chance at grabbing an inch over the next, about 13, 14 days. So much higher chances starting to improve here. This is our wet corridor on the northern edge of the jet stream, and then, of course, the Pacific Northwest getting hit. But the Pacific Northwest numbers are substantially higher. That's your 14-day outlook on getting, 13-day outlook on getting 2 inches. And here's 4. So you can really see how much moisture is targeting parts of the Pacific Northwest in this pattern. All right, let's go out there and look at week 2. Now, all the models over the weekend continue to trend wetter here, from the CPC to the European, and finally the GFS picked up on a little bit more. So I am buying into this being the setup going forward, with the last holdout of drier weather probably being the Northeast. Just kind of shows up in each model here. From there, let's go talk about temperatures quickly, then we'll get you to the long range. This is our frost potential over the next 7 days, but overall we got quite a bit of mild air in the middle part of the country, for here on Monday. So from Monday to Tuesday, we just keep it on. A lot of 60s, 70s, and 80s. Some places may be cracking 90 down here in Texas and Oklahoma, pretty far to the north. But then we know that as we go from Wednesday into Thursday, remember that high pressure sinks in, the cold air pushes up against the mountains, and that's our best chance of some snow there as the warmer air presses into the southeast. Now from Thursday into Friday and Saturday, there's a brief warm up in the midsection of the country, to be in the mid 40s, low 50s for this point in October. That's actually a degree or 2 above average. But we've got some pretty chilly air down south, but a lot of this is rain cooled down here. But did you notice I don't see any extended shots at really, really cold air? And we see that too in the ensemble. Here's your 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. Some cooler air comes in at times, but it doesn't stick around. You see, we're missing big high amplitude blocking like over Greenland or the Hudson Bay or over the, Aleutian Islands. I'm talking about big ridges of high pressure that force cold air to dive into the central United States or into the west or into the east. Doesn't matter. Just getting cold air in North America. We're going to have to wait much later in the season to get there. So what I want to do with these remaining tabs is 2 things. I want to give you an update on Brazil. This will be a topic we'll talk about all week. And then I'm going to give you the latest I've got for the long range. All right. So Brazil, planting progress continued to slow last week. Now, where are we? We're at, in Mato Grosso, we're at 83% planted, and 93% would be the average. But this was a big deviation from where we started off the year. And a lot of us have questions as to how much of this crop is going to be needed to be replanted. And here's what we see for the next 15 days. Now, this was a substantial trend in the models over the weekend. They just went much drier over a larger area. There's about 80% of Brazil's growing area inside of that circle I just drew there. The flooding continues south, like in parts of Paraguay, Santa Catarina, down into Rio Grande do Sul, maybe clipping northern Uruguay and this section of northeastern Argentina. But this trend downward was substantial, and the temperatures, especially right in through here, are going to be absolutely cranked. We might see temperatures easily over 40 C. I mean, that's 104 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to get some hot days coming in here in the next week or so. This is something we got to watch through the rest of November because we need the early season moisture for germination and a good quality start to the crop. This will start us questioning how much will need to be replanted and what the quality of this crop looks like. Now, the questions are always the same. How much acreage was added? How much of the crop is really in some sort of stress? But this is a lot to see in terms of dry weather early in the season, especially with the heat coming on. and there's still flooding to the south. So we will watch this and discuss it all week. But from here, I want to jump into a bit more of a longer range discussion for North America. So what was released on Friday was the new week 3, week 4 forecast. This is the second half of December. And our government, the CPC, really went after a very El Nino look for the second half of December. Wet south, a little bit drier north, and more mild north. And I don't think the pattern's going to favor exactly this setup during that time period. Some of my reasoning for that is this. We saw a bit of a resurgence lately in the Indian Ocean dipole. It's gone back and rebounded a bit. Well, let me just show you. It was diving down, but then it popped back up as of late. So that's why we see some more cold water coming out here, and these trade winds are still just screaming. But there's right now a bit of a westerly wind burst over here, and that's going to enhance sinking motion in the atmosphere there while this El Nino begins to strengthen a bit. I do think we are finally going to get to see some of the influence of an El Nino. Now, let me put together a full story for you on this. If that El Nino gets cranking, what we would normally expect is split jet stream flow coming in the country like this. I think we get this part of it, but I'll make a correction. This will likely set up. It's going to come from somewhere in here. But I don't think the jet stream splits over the west. I think if there's a split, it might be maybe closer to the Aleutian Islands. So if that split is somewhere in here, that means the flow comes together and dives and comes across the country. And therefore, this prevents the west from seeing an extended risk of drier conditions as we go forward. And that's an important change on what El Ninos typically deliver, because if it's a normal El Nino, you would say, well, expect really cold air to sit down here throughout much of the month of November, expect it to be mild in the northwest, and you'd also say drier northwest, drier midwest, wet across the south. Because we're seeing the combination of the MJO position with El Nino being controlled by the Indian Ocean dipole, I think the whole thing actually pans out a little differently. And this is the case I want to build for you. We continue to see this sinking motion here. So rising motion just continues to surface on either side of it, maybe moving some over to South America, Central America, but there's not overall a major shift in this to tell me to not tell you that the Pacific jet still plays a big role. And so I look out there and I say, wait, the MJO wants to come right back over here to phase 8 and 1, where it's been living now for a very long time. And what that means is if you're in the month of November, well, we just tend to get more troughs in this area. Now there's other factors helping this, but we tend to get more troughs here and ridges up the East Coast. These troughs, though, don't get stuck. They're there and they move across the country. And if that's what November looks like, the beginning of December also has some sort of Gulf of Alaska trough feature when the MJO stays stuck like it is. This also sets up a much stronger subtropical piece to the jet stream, which will be critical to understanding how precipitation patterns across the U.S. evolve. But I'm still hung up on this. I still think that the November 15 to December 15 outlook released by the European model this weekend still likely has this right. And overall, I think it's a wetter, more disrupted pattern. If you add the first 15 days of December, I still think we have 3 large systems from now until then that are going to enter the west and roll across the country with good pull on moisture from the Gulf of Mexico with the subtropical jet aiding. I think that this is going to be a drought corrective time period for much of the country from the 15th of November to the 15th of December. And there's multi-model evidence, there's meteorological evidence, and we just showed you kind of the thinking behind all of this. And I bought into it, so we'll see if it's right. Okay. Next, longer range. Ready? This is the newest update on the strength of this El Nino going forward from the European model. Remember, earlier season projections were like, oh, this is going to be way up here, almost 3 degrees C. We've watched them pull back, and now the current thinking is that this one peaks out somewhere around 2 degrees C above average. Now, there's a lot of discussion. Is this thing just going to crash by the time we get into next July or August back into La Nina? And some of the models were super aggressive on that. But I want to show you what we know. I don't want to jump all the way to next summer when we haven't even got into winter yet. Right now in November, there's our ocean temperature pattern. That's December into January. So this will be the peak of this El Nino during that time frame. I still don't see, like a lot of folks are worried about a Modoki El Nino where they're trying to just pull all this warm water way out over here, but leave a lot of cold water coming into this part of South America. It's important. It's not as important as some folks are making it in terms of our precipitation pattern. But when does that start to fade? Well, maybe not until March and April. Now, what some of people were worried about was if we already see this crashing into La Nina by May, but the North Atlantic stays as warm as it is and the North Pacific stays as warm as it is, what does that mean for the precipitation pattern across the United States? Right now, some of the models are super aggressive at being really wet east of the Rocky Mountains. And they're also favoring a decent chance at rainfall, especially from California to maybe Oregon. But the worry is getting into next spring, summer, and beyond that if this Atlantic stays so warm and El Nino crashes to La Nina, folks are already worried about massive hurricane season next year. And I'm just like, hold on. We haven't even, so many things that go into that. We just need to pump the brakes a little bit. But a lot of that came from the Canadians because their seasonal model, which runs out longer into June, July, and August, look at this. They wanted to bring back full force, La Nina and keep this just pumped full of heat. So that's where some of that dialogue came from. No one's ready to make an accurate forecast out that far, but this is something to look at. So can I go back to the model I trust more, the European seasonal? Let's go into the United States and let me show you some of the changes that did happen in our winter forecast. So we're going to go seasonal anomaly in inches. I'm going to take you back here. There we are. So the South continued to stay wet, although not as wet as it was. One big change was the Southwest. The newest model runs were much wetter than the previous runs. Now, they kept the Northwest drier. And I would say, of course they did, because if you look, let me just go back and show you this. If you looked at December through February on all our most recent El Nino years, and you plotted the precipitation, you'll see here that it was drier in this area. But during these same years, okay, we had better flow into California, wetter in through here, wetter across the south, and if we had a drier spot, it was parts of the Ohio Valley. So you look at that and you're like, well, I kind of think I felt like I saw that. Yeah, that's almost the same pattern that the European model is forecasting. It's giving you a very El Nino pattern, and it is possible that this is the result. It's also suggesting that you keep the temperature, flipped over. Let's go with seasonal here, milder north and cooler south. Now you say, well, what gets you that? What makes this is just zonal flow in our two branches of the jet stream. And I don't think we're going to see that all winter long. No way. Now, could we add up more days across the country this winter with mild weather versus cold? Sure. But when it gets cold, I'm telling you, the temperature is going to snap hard this year. And we're already starting to have discussions about what the polar vortex looks like. We're comparing it to northern hemisphere snow cover. There's all sorts of discussion going on in the background with my colleagues that we're going to kind of flesh out and give to you with time here. But I wanted you to see these latest updates from the European model. And again, let's go back to that seasonal precipitation anomaly figure and just kind of keep an eye on this. Now, just for the fun of it, I want to play it all out. So this would be out there to January, February, March. This is February, March, and April. Some of the models are going after an extremely wet spring at this point. So we'll watch it. Okay, this is way out there. This jumps over 2 entire seasons to get you to this. But I want to keep us all aware of what we could be expecting out this far. All right, I'm going to stop there and just tell you some of the big things we'll watch this week. Big conversation will be Brazil. So we'll keep an eye on that as this more zonal flow comes across the United States. And until tomorrow morning, have a good rest of your day. Thanks.